is a living, work and life in Vietnam today. Forward 14 years ago, I met a young man at a UC Berkeley social event for visiting academics from Vietnam. I can't recall these academics, the other guests, or the many animated discussions, but I remember very clearly one intent young man named Joran Sagas. He has a brief chart. He he was working on his dissertation, but we were also searching for a sense of meaning and purpose in life. Cloister's academia had begun to wear. He talked up to me because I had just taken a year-long solo bicycle trip and written about it in a book and was about to launch headlong into another journey. It was easy to urge a man down a path his heart already yearned for, even easier than one had been down a similar road and enjoyed it immensely. I often thought of it was standing on a mountain top next to the bicyclist who is staring down a long, step descent on an unfamiliar single dirt track train with bolder and unseen twist and turn, urging him forward with a gentle nod and the word, "Yes, yes, you can always come back and pick up where you left off." Alas, it's about a mirror deception inconsequential in a greater scheme of knowing how way lead on to way. Such is a fate of beginner. I once scribbled a few lines a long time ago as a very young man contemplating his first voyage. Why do we go? Because we are afraid. Then why don't we stay? Because our cowardice might diminish us. What do you fear? The malice of stranger, inconvenience, mysterious and of unmarked road. Will the act of departure defy us? I know the answer now, yet always irrevocably. Dangerous contacted me recently. He explained, "It's actually thanks to your advice that I stayed in graduate school, went to Vietnam, finished my PhD, and ended up spending more than 10 years living and teaching in Hanoi. I find it very rewarding to know that others have benefit from my work and word. As most writers now, monetary compensation, even award don't amount to much on the greater scale of things. They say you can't take it with you, and it's true, but I bet that if there's anything you can take beyond this existence, it's the karma you have earned from the positive impact you have on the lives of others. And that's what I believe Jero and his students has achieved with their book Is a Living, an ambitious combination and translation of interviews with ordinary Vietnamese about their lives and occupations. The premise of the book is beguiling in simplicity, but its content is epic in scope, cutting a clean slide from the Vietnamese social economy started from top to bottom. The sheer variety of interview and the ringing honesty of the interviews work make for an impressive and revealing read. The translation is clean and uncluttered. Reading it in English, I can hear clearly their voice speaking in Viet. This is the sign of a first-rate translation. A year or two in a country does not make an expert out of anyone. A decade does. 10 years of immersion in a place of joys, sorrows, discoveries, heartbreak, friendships, anger, despair, and hope. In that time, a full quarter of an adult human working life, a man will have lived, loved, and lost, not once but several times. And if he has the eyes willing to see, the heart willing to feel, the mind willing to understand, then and only then does he becomes an expert. That's what Zero has invested in Vietnam, and it shows. Its living is, without a doubt, the best non-fiction work on Vietnam I've seen in a decade. Preface. The interviews in the books were conducted as part of a class I taught while directing the University of California Education Abroad program in Vietnam. I had come to Vietnam in 2000 to begin research for a PhD in history at the University of California at Berkeley. 2 years later, I was appointed to the local director of the UC program, a position I enjoyed so much that I didn't give it up until 10 years later. Although the program were originally designed for American students, over the years I gradually integrated local students into my classes so that by 2008 I was getting equal number of students from the US and Vietnam as we investigated the processes of change we call development. By 2010, I has decided to organize our investigations around the theme of work, and Project Kim An was born. As we explained on the project's website, translated literally from Vietnamese, Kim An means for age or look for food. In addition to describing that what every living creature does to survive, is also a slang term for working. By using this term, we want to emphasize that no matter what the outward form, every occupation shares the same basic concern to making a living. That means that the people we interviewed as part of this project were not just CEOs and factory managers. They are garbage picker and mobile phone saleswoman, advertising executive and sex worker, motorbike parker and ride farmers, promotion girl and drug dealer. All of the interviews are intended to help us develop a better understanding of the reality of working in Vietnam today, and through that, a better understanding of the reality of living in a period of incredible change in the nation's economy, society, and culture. Over the course of 2 years, we conducted more than 150 interviews and make many of them available on our website in both English and Vietnamese. The present book bring together selected interviews from Project Kim An with image by my student and friend Mai Huyền Ji. We drew our inspiration for the project from many sources. In the 1920s and 30s, Vietnam went through an earlier period of rapid economic growth and urbanization that in many ways prefigured the processes of change we see in Vietnam today. One result was a social realism movement in Vietnamese literature that saw authors like Vũ Đình Chí and Vũ Trắc Phụng produce wonderful work of reporters introducing reader to a world of rickshaw puller, sex worker, and household servants, among others. Closer in time, but not in space, the 2000 book Geek American talk about their job reminded us the incredible range of occupations that lurk beneath the surface of contemporary society, and the monologue style of its interviews provided a model for our own edited process. Like this work, our projects were shaped by two ideas. First is the notion that our work is an important window on ourselves and our world is what we do to survive, and most human beings will spend the greater part of their working life doing it. The second is the idea is that every job and every person doing that job is worthy of our respect, our interest, and our time. Some of the people we interviewed, we knew that already. Some of them were introduced by us to us by friends or family, and others we just met by chance. Interviews usually, but not always, involved as the two interviewers. Before we began, we prepared ourselves by learning something about the job and discussing our strategy. As part of the project, we have developed a shared template of questions and themes to investigate, but we were also conscious of the need to allow each conversation to take its own course. As much as possible, we tried to engage in a dialogue with people. We explained who we were, where we were from, and what we were trying to achieve, and we encouraged them to ask questions of us too. Some people gave us permission to make an audio recording, but more usually they did not, in which case we either took note while we were interviewing or we recreated the contents of the section immediately after it was over. For those of you who has done research in Vietnam, you'll know that the standard of informed consent requires a professional and anthropological research in the West are difficult to intense in Vietnam. Asking people to size a typical consent form would have rendered many of our conversations impossible and would have changed the nature of any we were still able to do. Within these limitations, however, we did our best to create conditions of informed consent. We explained our projects to everyone we talked with and let them know that our work might be published and gave them the opportunity not to participate to, to participate anonymously or to review the text of the interview before publication. Interviews were first transcribable from the audio recording and note, then edited and translated as needed. The first step of the process was taking out the question, then changing the order or removing part we felt were repetitive. Our goal was to capture the flavor and idea of the original conversation, but in a format that was accessible and engaging to the average reader. We then translated the text into Vietnam, English, or Vietnamese. In general, we placed our interviews toward the colloquial English side of the spectrum on the logic that we wanted the language to sound as natural as appropriated, appropriate, appropriate in English as it did in Vietnamese. Most of the original translations were done by the interviews themselves, some though, as done myself. For all of them, I bear final responsibility for any mistake, deformation, or omission that may have occurred in the editing or translation process. For interested readers, many of the interviews are available in Vietnamese on the project's website. In most interviews, we changed the names and enough detail to make it difficult to identify the people we talked with. Particularly in Vietnam, it can be hard to anticipate on the possible context where information might be considered sensitive, so it seemed best to err on the side of caution rather than unintentionally expose our informant to any negative repercussion. It will be obvious, though, that with some interview, for example, a company director or a well-known artist, it was impossible to avoid identifying the person. In this case, we've given us permission to use their real names. Some reader may be surprised at the way the interviews are organized. While the basic arc of the narrative, beginning with a rice farmer and ending with a bonds cleaner, may have a certain logic, the journeys between them take some twists and turns. This is deliberate. My goal was to juxtapose certain occupations we might not normally associate with each other and to call into question assumptions about their relative value to society. After all, both an artist and an art forger are producing goods for the market, and a homemaker may have to solve problems as complex as many faced by the director of strategy for a multi-million dollars confectionery company, a prison inmate in a much part of the system that keep a nation safe as the woman and as the man and woman who guard its borders. The point of contrast like this is to underline the way of all us are engaged in the same basics enterprise, making a living. Singapore 2013 Zero Circus. Acknowledgement. This book would not have been possible without the people who took time out of their day to sit down with us and talk about their job. Our first step of gratitude then is to all the people we interviewed between 2010 and 2011. Next, I'd like to thank all the students of EAP Vietnam and the U News class, whether they participated directly a contributor or indirectly through their enthusiasm and inspiration over the years. They are all a part of this project. Especially thanks go to the irrepressible Ali Wong, a participant in that first and epic EAP semester, who gave me her dog-ear copy of Gig and unknowingly started the ball rolling back in 2002. I also have to thank anyone at the UCEAP office who placed such trust in me and provided me with unfailing support over the years, especially Peter, Mary, Nicole, Joyce, Eva, Doris, Ines, Amy, and Maid. I'm also indebted to our wonderful collaborator in Hanoi University, particularly Trương Văn Khôi, Hoàng Hương Giang, program Hoàng Gia Thư, and I already cannot thank enough my super program coordinator Phạm Thị Phương Liên and Nguyễn Thu Trang, and my student, colleague, and brother Alex Thái Đình Võ. Finally, I'd like to dedicate this book to the millions of working women and men of Vietnam who get out of bed in the morning or work through the night to make a living for themselves and their family. Without them and the millions of different jobs they do, the crazy beautiful place in that is Vietnam would not be possible.